Hey, Blevins here. We're gonna make pinch pots. So basically, you're gonna take a small amount of clay, probably about the size of a clementine. You could go smaller if you wanted. I would actually make 2 pieces that are about that small. Okay, notice that I'm sort of try and get them about the same. If they're not, then they're not going to stick together correctly. One's going to be bigger than the other. That's not great. So notice I'm kind of rolling this in my hand. I can also roll it on my mat. Okay, then what you want to do is you want to take your thumb, you're going to stick it into your project, so kind of like that. Okay, and then you're going to take your other fingers on the same hand and sort of pinch and turn and pinch and turn until you get a nice little pinch pot. Now, one of the things that you want to do is you don't want this to be, the walls to be uneven, so don't pinch, really hard and then the next time pinch super soft, because you'll be pinching kind of thin and then thick walls. So I have one little pinch pot here. I'm going to set it down so that, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take and put this back in my hand, and then I'm going to pinch and turn until I get another pinch pot about the same size as the one that I just made. Now, the other thing that you might want to do is if you feel like this is, too thick on the bottom, just gauge. Sometimes I'll gauge just with my thumb and my finger. I'll just make a gauge of how thick this is. So I'm just pinching and turning and pinching and turning. Okay, so now I have 2 pinch pots that are basically the same. The next thing we need to do is something called scoring and slipping. So now we're going to score and slip our pinch pot. So right here at the top, this is the top lip, and it's here and on the other one. What you want to do is you want to very gently score. So whenever you put clay together, you have to do something called scoring and slipping. What is scoring? It's just lightly roughing up the clay that you want to put together on both sides. So it kind of looks like that. Okay, I'm going to do that on both sides of this. And then you're going to need some slip. So what is slip? It's basically clay and water, okay? It can be, somewhat soupy, that's fine, all the way to almost mayonnaise consistency. As long as it's watery, you're fine. Don't put too much water on it. So what you're gonna do is you're either gonna take, and this is where I like to just dip my finger in, get a little bit on it, and then I like to, and I'll move this out of the way, butter the edge. So I'm just dipping my hand into my slip container over the top of that scored area, okay? Do that on both sides. Now, you don't need a ton of slip on this. If this is all wet and gooey, that's going to be a problem, okay? So what now I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 2 pinch pots and I'm going to put them together, okay? And sometimes you have to press them together and sort of blend them back together Okay, so now we have this. We have basically an air bubble inside of here with two pieces. All right. Once we have this, we're going to put this aside and we're going to roll a coil. So rolling coils. The first thing you want to do is start with a carrot-shaped piece of clay, okay? Then what I usually do is I like to roll between my fingertips and almost my knuckle. So when we're rolling, it's going to be right along here. I also roll by pushing forwards and down at the same time. And this is what that looks like. What you want is you want a nice, thin, uniform coil. So this is a little bit thick, so I'm just going to cut off a piece and continue rolling. It can be somewhat thin. What we want is we want a coil that is the length of your project. So it has to be pretty long. Notice I'm pushing and rolling. When I get to a point where I need to, I spread out my fingers and I continue to roll. All right. So that's rolling a coil. So now I have a nice coil. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap that around this. Now you don't have to do any extra scoring and slipping here. This is technically your insurance policy. And I have more than what I needed. I'm just going to pinch this off. Okay. And now I have something that kind of looks like a planet or a hamburger. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to spread half of it this way, and then I'm going to turn this around and spread the other half this way. Okay, so that's what that looks like. And I'm just doing this with my finger. It's not going to look pretty right off the bat. The other thing, this is the seam that went over, so you might want to smooth that in. All you're basically doing is you're blending this together. Okay, so now I have one side. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to kind of spread half of it to the other side. Again, this does not look really all that great right now, okay? If we left this, this would be not such great craftsmanship. So now on to smoothing. Okay, now on to smoothing. This is pretty rough. This is not the greatest craftsmanship. What do we want on this? We want a nice, smooth sphere. To do that, I actually recommend using your rib. So you made one, or if you're working with us in class, you can use one of these. I prefer the metal ones for this, but there are other ones that are more malleable for this as well, okay? So what you can do is you're gonna start smoothing that seam and blending that clay in. Now, one of the things that you don't want to do is you don't want to put a lot of pressure on this, either when you're blending it in or as you're hanging on to it, because there is an air bubble in here. So what I'm going to ask you to do is treat it like a baby bird. Don't be real careful with it, because you want this to stay with the air bubble on the inside. And I like to pull several directions here. I'll show you the rest with this. You know, the metal ones really do work the best for this particular project. Now, you might say, well, that's not really a sphere, kind of a wonky sphere. Well, once you have everything smoothed in to a point, then, and if you needed to, you could use other tools. So we have a series of these plastic tools. You could even use your popsicle stick to smooth. Okay? Those are some great ideas. So now that I have this, I have an air bubble in here. So now what I want to do is I'm going to get this back into a spherical place. So you can do one of two things. You can roll it on your mat or on whatever you're working on. You can roll it back into shape, or you can tap it slightly. But like I said, treat it like a baby bird. It's fragile. And then if you really want to come in here and you want to start kind of smoothing this, you just smooth it with your finger, or again with a popsicle stick or another tool. A couple of things we do teach in ceramics. So we don't just teach ceramic skills, we teach life skills. So if yours didn't turn out exactly the way that you wanted it to turn out, you could always smash this and start over. You're gonna hear me say this all the time. Let it go. Sometimes you just gotta let stuff go. Okay, you gotta let it go and start over, which is perfectly fine. You didn't spend a lot of time on it. I've only spent maybe 5, 10, less than 10 minutes on this. Okay, so then I could come back and I could continue to roll it. And then what I now have is I have a sphere of clay. That's how you make the textured sphere.